Oh my god, we got some great news yesterday. It got lost in the shuffle. I had to cover the Zach Wheeler video because I wanted to title this video about the new Mets owner, because that's exactly what's happening. It looks like it's very close. It's not, I don't think, 100% official. Maybe it is, but it is looking very real that the Mets are getting a new owner. Steve Cohen, he's got lots of money. I'm going to talk about it more in depth in this video. We've also got the Omar Narváez trade with the Milwaukee Brewers. The Mets also made a minor trade grabbing Jake Marisnick. We got Garrett Cole rumors, we got Mookie Betts rumors, Anthony Rendon rumors. We got a lot of stuff to talk about in today's video. But before we do, remember to leave a like on this if you guys did enjoy it. That's the best way to show your support. Subscribe to the channel if you're new and you enjoy the content. If you love baseball, click that sub button, join the team. Remember to get in the comments down below. I love to hear your guys' opinions. Tell me what you think about the Mets' new owners, the Omar Narváez trade, anything down below. And remember to follow me on Twitter and Instagram at GiraffeNeckMarc. Links are in the description. I'm always talking baseball over there. So let's get started with the best news of the day. Some of the best news that I have ever heard as a fan of the New York Mets, and that is that we are going to be getting a new ownership group in the next 5 years. Now, this news broke yesterday. This isn't necessarily new news, but like I said, I wanted to cover Wheeler. That was the big news of the day in terms of all of baseball yesterday. But this new Mets owners news is big for me and big for the New York Mets fan base, because for the longest time we have been complaining about how the Wilpons are not only terrible owners, but probably some of the worst in all of baseball, if not the worst. And from what it looks like, the Wilpons, their time is ticking. They are on their way out, and it's just, oh, it's so amazing. For those of you who've been around the channel for a long time, you know that I constantly complain about how the New York Mets are a big market team. They're playing in New York City, the biggest market in all of sports in the entire world, and the Mets don't spend like a big team. They don't spend like the Yankees. They don't spend like the Dodgers, the Cubs. They spend like a mid-market team, and in the past they've spent like the Oakland A's, like the Tampa Bay Rays. Like in the past we've signed guys like Todd Frazier, like Jason Vargas, like Chris Young, John Roush. I mean, like, we spent on some really just not good players in the past when there was obvious better choices on the market. This year is going to be another one of those seasons. I don't expect the Mets to spend money this year, because the way that this new ownership thing is set up, he's not really in control just yet, which I guess I should probably explain that to you since I really haven't done that yet. So yesterday, shortly after Wheeler signed, Ken Rosenthal broke the news about the new Mets ownership group. Here's what he had to say. The Sterling Partners and Steve Cohen are negotiating an agreement in which Cohen would increase in his investment in the Mets, because he already, I think, has like a small investment. Fred Wilpons will remain control person and CEO for 5 years, and Jeff Wilpons, who is his son, will remain COO for 5 years. So this is big news, because after these 5 years, the Wilpons, they're gone. They have nothing to do with the Mets anymore. The guys who got screwed by Bernie Madoff and probably also screwed over a few people investing with him, they're gone. The lack of spending is gone. And what's even better is that this Steve Cohen guy was a huge Mets fan growing up. He grew up in Great Neck, New York. He's been around the area. He's been a fan of the team his whole life. And oh yeah, he's just a little rich. Casually a billionaire. When he does take over the Mets, he will be the richest owner in Major League Baseball. His estimated net worth is something like above $10 billion, an insane amount of money, like you can't even fathom it. And people close to Steve Cohen and his family have said that he is going to spend. He wants the Mets to be the best team. He wants them to act like the best team. He wants them to spend like the best team. He wants the best players. He wants to pay them. He has no problem doing that. And as a fan of the Mets and seeing them not do this for what feels like my entire lifetime, or really more realistically like the last 10 years, this is music to my ears. This is possibly some of the best news that I've ever received as a Mets fan in my life, because the 23 years that I've been around, there's not a lot of good, and part of that is due to the Wilpons family. They suck. They really haven't done anything good for this New York Mets organization besides getting us Citi Field, which is a huge upgrade over Shea Stadium. Sorry, Shea Stadium fans. Citi Field, far better. But besides the new stadium, not much has happened. They haven't won a World Series with the Wilpons in charge. They've like won the NL East, what, like 3 or 4 times maybe? They've been to the World Series a couple times, but they haven't won anything. The success that the Mets have had since the Wilpons have taken over as the owners has been completely downhill. It has not been good. And yes, it's not a guarantee that Steve Cohen is going to step in and automatically the Mets are going to be the best team in Major League Baseball. They're going to take over the Yankees. They're going to take over the Dodgers, the Red Sox, all these teams. But at least we know that there's a guy who has money, who says he is going to be willing to spend it, and the Mets will at least give the impression to the fan base that they care. Because right now, we know how much money the Mets make every year. They're making $300 million in revenue. From the playoffs, they made like $100 million when they made it to the World Series, and they still refuse to spend the money on free agents. They have a tight budget. Brody Van bandwagon, and granted, he hasn't made some great moves, but he hasn't been given a big budget to use either. The spending room that he has had is very minimal. With a guy like Steve Cohen, it makes us believe, or at least leads us to believe, that the Mets spending budget is going to be way higher. Whoever is the GM at the time, because I'm not sure if it'll be Brody in 5 years, but if it is, he'll have way more money to spend. The Mets will become an aggressive team. They'll start spending like a New York team, and I'm just so happy. Now, the thing that gets me even more excited is that apparently Steve Cohen might get a little more involved quicker than we thought. There's been rumors and talk going around that Steve Cohen is just going to start influxing money, even though his controlling stake or his owning stake is not as big as it's going to be at the end of the 5 years. He's just going to start flooding money into the team. He wants them to spend now. He's had enough. If that's the case, oh my goodness, I'm looking forward to this free agency because, you know, we got a couple guys like Anthony Rendon could play third base for the Mets. There's a couple good starting pitchers on the market. Am I getting my hopes up? Of course I am. I'm a Mets fan. That's what I do. I get my hopes up every single year thinking something's going to change. But with the new ownership group with the Sterling Partners and Steve Cohen, we can at least see the light at the end of the tunnel and know that, hey, in 5 years, we might be spending some money and be a very competitive baseball team. So I love it. That's a great start. If I had some champagne, trust me, I'm popping bottles. I'm excited. But long story short, by 2025, the Wilpons are gone, Cohen and the Sterling Partners are taking over, and the New York Mets spend like a New York team. Myself, my dad, my family, Mets fans across the world, very happy. The Mets also dabbled in the news today, making a couple minor free agent signings. They had a Jared Parker and Max Moroff. Neither of these guys are going to have a huge impact, and I really hope that we don't see them at the major league level this year, because if we see them playing, that means that there's injuries, and that means that the Mets aren't playing very well, because Jared Parker and Max Moroff, with all due respect, they're not guys I want in my everyday lineup. But the real, I guess, move that they made today was making a trade with the Houston Astros, in which they acquired Jake Marisnick in exchange for left-handed pitcher Blake Taylor and outfield prospect Kennedy Corona. Now, Kennedy Corona, I know little to nothing about. All I know is he's not a top prospect, so while he could turn out to be, who knows, maybe a good player down the line, I'm really not worried about it. Blake Taylor, left-handed pitcher, I think he pitched in the fall league recently, and he did pretty well. Again, not a top prospect, so I'm really not sweating over it. The thing that I'm most upset about is that we went out and traded for Jake Marisnick, basically an upgraded version of Juan Lagares. Like, this guy is not a star. He's not a everyday center fielder. It leads me to believe now that the Mets have no interest in Starling Marte, or at least the asking price was too high that they said, no, we can't do that, because grabbing Jake Marisnick, a guy who hits left-handed pitching pretty well and is a very good defensive center fielder, leaves me to believe that they're going to be doing a platoon situation with him and Nimmo this season, where Nimmo would play against the right-handed pitchers and Jake Marisnick would be the outfielder against lefties and probably late in games for defense. Now, the reason I don't get excited about Jake Marisnick is because offensively, he's just not very good, and that's playing in Houston, where I'm not sure if you guys remember, but they were part of a cheating scandal where they knew what pitches were coming, and while 2017 seemed to be the year that they really knew the pitches were coming, Marisnick still wasn't a great hitter. Like, that was by far the best season of his career. He finished with an OPS plus above 100, the only time in his career, but 243 average, 319 on base, 496 slugging was very nice, but it's only in 230 plate appearances, and again, the dude knew what was coming, so yeah, you'd think he would hit better than he normally does. We then saw him come back down a little bit more to earth in 2018 and 2019, where he hit 224 in those two seasons, with a 283 on base, 406 slugging, and a 689 OPS. Doesn't offer much at the plate. What you're getting him for is that he's fast, and he's a great fielder out in center field. So in a platoon situation, he works, but I'm just not excited about it because I wanted Starling Marte. I wanted a legitimate center fielder, and while I like Brandon Nimmo, he's just not a center fielder. That's not his position. He's a corner guy. I love his bat, but his glove, not great. So for those reasons, I'm a little bit upset because it's just, you know, the Mets being kind of the Mets again. Going back to the whole Wilpon thing, they didn't want to get Starling Marte. Jake Marisnick costs like probably $10 million less a year. I understand that they can now put that $10 million maybe to another starting pitcher, maybe to a relief pitcher, but I wanted a center fielder. You got to be strong up the middle, in my opinion. And then the big move, or I guess the bigger trade of the day, was with the Milwaukee Brewers and the Seattle Mariners. The Brewers are receiving catcher Omar Narváez from the Seattle Mariners in exchange for pitching prospect Adam Hill, who, funny enough, was a part of a trade with the Mets last season. Keon Broxton to the Mets in exchange for Adam Hill, former University of South Carolina Gamecock. You know I always got to throw that in there. We'll talk about what the Mariners got briefly because there's not much to talk about here. Adam Hill, big lanky kid, like he's 6'6", right-handed pitcher. He's going to be 23 years old next year, so you still have a little bit of time with him. I don't ever see Adam Hill being an ace. Like, he's not a top prospect. He's not flying through the minor leagues, but he can be a very serviceable starting pitcher in Major League Baseball. The dude's huge. If he can use that height and get a nice downhill plane to his advantage, he can have a very solid career. Now to go over the juice of this trade, Omar Narváez. That's the real story about this trade, is that the Brewers Brewers now figured out who's going to be their catcher in 2020. They lost out on Yasmani Grandal. They now got Omar Narváez. Now, I'm actually a fan of Omar Narváez. He's a very good hitting catcher. He is definitely plus in the hitting department. It's just defensively, he's not very great. One thing about Omar Narváez that I do like is that he does have some really good pop in his bat. He hit 22 home runs last year playing for the Seattle Mariners in a park that is not hitter-friendly, to say the least. But building off a strong 2018 with the Chicago White Sox, he had a very good year with the Mariners in 2019. 22 homers, 12 doubles, 55 RBIs, 278 average, 353 on base, 460 slugging, and 813 OPS. This built off a season with the White Sox where he had a 275 average, 366 on base, 429 slugging, and a 794 OPS. So 2 seasons in a row with an OPS hovering right around 800 for a catcher is exceptional offensively. It's just on the defensive side, you are not getting a whole lot with him. That is his big knock. Not particularly great behind the plate. And for the Brewers, who probably need a little more offense now, having lost Mike Moustakas, you lost Yasmani Grandal. They're losing a lot on the offensive side, so they need to address that. They got Omar Narváez. Just they're cutting down on the defense because you lost Yasmani Grandal's bat, but you also lost the great defense behind the plate with him. Not sure how the Brewers pitching staff's going to handle it. They need all the help they can get. It's not very strong. Be interesting to see what the Brewers do, but right now the Brewers are in deep trouble. No pitching. Not great offense either. It's pretty much down to Christian Yelich, Ryan Braun. Lorenzo Cain looked terrible last year. Keston Hiura can still smack, but they're definitely a little weak this year. They need to make some big moves this offseason. Otherwise, it's been a slow day. We had a big move yesterday. We had a lot of stuff going on then. Today, I figured I'd cover the Mets ownership, the trade with the Brewers, and the minor trade the Mets made. I'd love to know what you guys think about all the stuff I talked about in today's video, the Mets owners, the trades, all that down in the comment section below. Remember to leave a like on the video if you did enjoy it, as well as subscribing if you are new and you enjoy the content. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter and Instagram at GiraffeNeckMarc. Shout out to all you guys who have been following me over there the last couple days. I do appreciate you. And we're going to wrap up today's video right there. You know the drill. YouTube recommends you watch this video right here, as well as this is my most recent upload. So click through those if you have not yet seen them. Thank you so much for watching today's video. I'll see you all next time for another video. Bye.